Hello and welcome to Solely Singleton episode 193. I'm your host, Brad. This is my co-host, Hiccups McGee.
How's it going?
We have an amazing episode for you guys today. Some would say it's...
Historic?
Exactly. That's clearly the correct answer. We're going to be discussing legendary creatures and their impact on Cube.
Sounds good. Alright, so this one's going to be a bit of a simpler episode than the last, but it's something that I've wanted to talk about for a while. One of the things that has happened with Magic is EDH Commander has become the dominant format. It's pushing design, it's pushing product, all of that is based on Commander. And some of it is not particularly exciting, the amount of product that we're getting and with the amount of new cards and all of that. But if you're going to push that type of thing, they also are just going to be pushing the amount of legendary things in sets, the amount of legendary new creatures, the amount of legendary new cards and things that reference legendaries. So, it's one of those that there are commander focused sets that obviously do it. But even in the normal sets, there's like a checkbox of like, you have to have this amount of legendary creatures. So as we've gotten more and more, it's just been kind of interesting to look at what legendaries actually mean in Cube. So by that, it's one of those previously a decade ago or whatever, legendary didn't matter for Singleton Cube. Like it meant nothing because you're Singleton, and one of the upsides of being Singleton was you don't have the downside of legendary. Like legendary doesn't have a downside then. It's just another card.
The only time legendary really came up was when you cloned your legendary and got sad.
Yeah, the legendary rules and that type of thing, it did kind of come up, but like generally legendary, it was a freebie for Singleton cubes. It was designed as like legendary is this like we can push the card because there won't be multiple of them on the battlefield at the same time. And Cube Singleton was able to kind of skirt around that and you didn't have to worry about that downside. Things like Raphaelos do nasty stuff and great. But as we're getting more and more legendaries, there is a design space that has been touched upon a little bit more recently, and I'm interested to see where it's going to go and if it's possibly going to be something that we should look into as Cube designers. So one of the main pushes that kind of brought this whole thing in focus for me was in Dominaria with the historic tag, particularly like Joyra, Weatherlight Captain had, whenever you cast a historic spell, draw a card. Historics being artifacts, legendaries, and sagas. Sagas not particularly that important, but artifacts were like, oh, we have artifacts in Cube. Oh, also we have legendaries in Cube. It could matter. It could come up. And surprisingly, we have a lot of legendaries in Cube.
So, let's use my cube as an example.
How many do you think there are in your cube, Brad?
100.
Yeah, there are. Just about a sixth of your cube is a legendary card.
Yeah, what's the actual number?
It's 106.
Nailed it.
With 6 of them being lands, which can sort of matter, but most of the things are related to spells or creatures that we've seen so far in design space, but still, 106.
Either way, that means a card in my cube has a higher chance of having the word legendary on it than being of any particular color.
Exactly. And that's kind of where I'm getting to, is like, yeah, right now, I can't say, oh, take a look and add some of these legendary matters things. Because, well, to be blunt, most of them suck. Like, Joyra's cool, but she's a 4-drop that doesn't have any protection and is a 3-3. And Izzet, which has good stuff now. It's not really there yet, but we've seen since Dominaria more and more of this design space being examined. So we had things like Urza's Ruinous Blast, where exile all non-land permanents that aren't legendary. That's a powerful effect. I mean, it's 5-drop, so like we're not there, but like that's an interesting one. Even the 40k stuff like Lichguard talked about legendary creatures from your graveyard to hand.
And let's say if Universes Beyond did something stupid, like go to Lord of the Rings plane.
Yeah.
There could hypothetically be a green 1-drop that cares about legendaries. Luckily, they will never do that, so we can ignore that fact on this show.
Yeah, because if they were going to do that, they would obviously be talking about Frodo Baggins, and that would obviously be a green-white 1/3 halfling that's legendary that talks about legendary stuffs. I mean, instead of the delighted halfling. So it is one of those, like, as we've progressed through the era of Commander, not only have we gotten more and more legendary legendaries. And like a lot of the good cards are just legendaries because that's how you can push it kind of thing. We've gotten more of this design space for legendary matters type things. Like Rona, Herald of Invasion. I love that card. I don't think it needs to be legendary focused, but guess what? When a 6th of your cube has legendary on it, it is going to interact with Rona.
I like what you said there, but I feel like I want to make a sort of correction to how I see legendary being used recently. You mentioned that a lot of good things are legendary because you can push legendaries further. That used to be the main use case of the word legendary. Nowadays, it's an interesting card is probably legendary because if something is interesting, they want it to be a draw for the EDH crowd.
That's very true, actually, yeah.
It's more that very interesting cards have a high probability of being or interacting with legendary.
Yeah, and that actually matters quite a bit because in limited environments, interesting things, you can curate your limited environment to take advantage of those interesting things. So I think that that does matter, and that is why we've seen more and more that just make it into cubes because they're fun and they're interesting, but they're also good. So yeah, that's very true. Obviously, Commander's not going away anytime soon.
If Commander goes away, it's probably taking Magic with it at this point.
Yeah, that's about right. The only potential is like maybe it goes harder into Arena or something like that, but like I don't see it.
WotC stands for Wizards of the Commander.
Yeah, Commander's here, and that's like it's the fundamental thing. Okay, that's cool. So that means we're going to continue to get more and more legendaries. We're going to get the interesting legendaries. And we're also going to see the continued design space for legendary matter type things. We're going to continue to see things like Rona, like the Whited Halfling, like Historic is going to come back. That's going to be a thing again. And I don't want to push cube designing into like, you need to support the legendary deck, because I don't think that that's the way to do it.
It's not there yet. If a card mentions interaction with legendary, it's like saying it interacts with a color, is how I would put it at this point in Magic.
That's about right, yeah. And because there's so much incidental support in the fact that legendaries just happen, doesn't mean that you have to make any additional changes to allow the card that has legendary matters to work. You know what I mean? Like you can just slot it in and it'll have a good chance of working.
Yeah, and I feel like we're talking about legendary a bunch and we're focusing on creatures because Commander.
Yes.
But the other elephant in the room is legendary planeswalkers.
Yep.
Which I know we're having the whole mom afterbirth thing right now with planeswalkers not being planeswalkers or whatever. But
guess what? There's still a lot of planeswalkers that are really good.
The most powerful cards in most formats are planeswalkers.
Yeah, I don't see that changing in limited environments anytime soon.
No, and they didn't say they're done with planeswalkers unless I misread what was being said, is that they're trying to make it so they can sell more people as legendary creatures.
Yeah, and I think that that's fair. It's one of those like, let's tune back from the everybody's a planeswalker that matters in the story to here's a few maybe, but let's focus on creatures that you can play as your commander. And it's not just planeswalkers either. Like Urza's Ruinous Blast shows legendary sorcery. There is design space for additional things that are legendary. I mean, legendary lands are actually really cool. There's some decent ones.
Decent's an understatement.
Yeah. So, you know, it's one of those that, like, it's not just creatures. Creatures are the primary one. They're the go-to obvious answer at the moment. They're the thing that most of these Legendary Matters cards reference. But there is a massive design space still available for Wizards. They're clearly looking into it and continuing. Like, if you just look at the amount of cards that reference legendaries, you see that it goes from, like, really, really old stuff to, like, a massive gap and then Dominaria, and then we just keep getting more and more of them. And I'm expecting that to continue and them to continue to explore these design spaces, these interesting effects that, like, you can have things that care about legendary without being shoehorned into an already defined archetype.
Yeah, I don't know what else we really want to cover on this subject. This is a shorter episode, but it's one that I had an inkling that we've wanted to cover for like 6 months at this point. When we were talking a few episodes ago, we really wanted to devolve into a whole debate on legendary as a topic, and we decided to sidebar that for this episode.
Right. And I'm still hesitant to actually do this because
It's clearly not there yet.
yeah, exactly. Like clearly we're not there yet. But oh boy, do I keep seeing more and more. Like it's ramping up into like, oh, it's gonna get there. It's gonna get there. And I wonder if this is gonna feel like humans did like 15 years ago, where you could slot in a human and like, yeah, there was enough support that like it would be not embarrassing. And nowadays it's just like, well, yeah, humans are obviously a just general archetype that happens and works. It'd be hilarious if that's just what legendaries are.
I feel like Legendary at this point, like trying to take advantage of it, feels more like where +1/+1 counters were when we were playing around with them in like 2017, 2018 with Ixalan.
Yeah, when we tried to push the blue-green.
That's how I feel about Legendary now, where it's like a don't try it, it's not going to work, but have it on your radar and maybe pick up pieces for when you think it will work.
Yeah, that's actually a good example because even back then, when we tried it and we're like, no, this doesn't work,
It was fun.
it was fun and it was very clear that it could and likely would eventually work in some manner. And I mean, it does work now. It's just in green-white.
There's some blue in there still, but yeah, it's, and black, honestly, at this point. But yeah, it's shifted around, and I think it's better off where it is now.
I agree.
I see Legendary as a thing going this route.
Yes.
Maybe the catalyst is the whole Planeswalker to Legendary creature thing going on right now, where maybe that's like the shift required to change something. I don't know.
It's very possible. And like I said, I think in the near-ish future, we're going to be getting some interesting support for this, just because I don't see Wizards designers passing up this clear hole in design space that has so much availability.
Especially not now that all the Mickey Mouse crew is Legendary creatures ready to be synergized with.
Yeah, exactly. It's all teed up. I'm just waiting for it kind of thing. And I mean, that's kind of like the problem of doing this episode is it's all teed up. But I still want to talk about it so that like, hey, keep it on your radar because it's teed up. We're not ready to take that swing. But soon, it's going to happen. I know it. And I'm excited. I think it is cool. I think it's really fun to have legendaries matter in Cube when for so long it was just a cool, we get around to the tax on legendaries.
Yeah, I wholly agree, and I look forward to when we inevitably tell everybody, oh my god, you gotta try the Legendary Creature deck as a draftable thing in your cube. It's so good, you've gotta be playing it. We're just not there yet. I think we're probably a few years out still, unless there's something in an upcoming set I'm not guessing yet, but I think we'll hit that breaking point.
How long was it from Ixalan to now?
It's like 6 years. I think we're at like countable on one hand.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's call it 4 because they've increased the rate of cards.
Don't start with me on that one, but yes, I think you're correct.
Yeah, so let us know, like, have you actually tried any of this stuff, or are you also interested, or do you just honestly think that I've lost my mind and clearly Eric has gone crazy?
Or are you already playing this and you're just such a hipster?
Yeah, I'd love to see that cube.
Please share with us.
Yeah.
All right, that's enough for us this week. Let's get out of here.
Sounds good.